Miami used to be the glittering crown jewel of American tourism, the place where celebrities partied till dawn, where influencers filmed sunset reels, where tourists spent thousands of dollars just to say they had been to South Beach. But right now, in 2025, a quiet exodus is underway, and the data proves it. Nobody wants to visit Miami anymore, unless you're an idiot. Think about it. Just 5 years ago, Miami hotels charged $800 a night for a room the size of a closet, and people lined up to pay it. Today, those same hotels are offering 50% discounts, and they still can't fill half their rooms. Convention attendance, the economic lifeblood that funded Miami's infrastructure for decades, has collapsed. It is 34% below 2019 levels, and the Miami Beach Convention Center's 2026 calendar is already showing 40% fewer bookings than normal. Major corporations like Goldman Sachs, Microsoft, and even Miami's own tech startups have slashed travel budgets to near zero, calling Miami non-essential in their new austerity guidelines. And it's not just business travel vanishing. Leisure tourism is bleeding out too. According to U-Haul's proprietary data that I've obtained, one-way truck rentals into Miami have dropped 210% since 2022, while rentals out of Miami have surged 327%, a complete reversal of the 2020-2021 migration wave. But here's what the city won't tell you. Miami's entire identity was built on a lie, the lie that endless tourism, crypto wealth, and beachfront glamour could sustain an economy with no real industry. When the crypto bubble popped in 2022, it didn't just take down FTX, it vaporized the entire class of buyers who were propping up Miami's luxury market. These weren't normal buyers, they were speculators, people who paid $5 million for condos they would never live in, using fake loan documents and offshore shell companies. Now they're gone, and the properties they left behind are rotting on the market. One luxury building in Brickell just reported a 78% vacancy rate, higher than Detroit's worst office towers. And it's not just the high-end suffering. Mid-tier hotels in places like Midtown and Winewood are struggling to hit 50% occupancy, forcing them to slash rates to $129 a night, a price we haven't seen since 2010. But wait, it gets worse. The very things that made Miami attractive, beaches, nightlife, and that vibe, are now repelling visitors. Tourists are reporting overrun beaches littered with broken glass, aggressive panhandlers on Ocean Drive, and a nightlife scene so saturated with influencers that it feels like a staged performance rather than an authentic experience. A recent TripAdvisor analysis found that negative reviews mentioning feels fake, too crowded, and not worth the hype have tripled since 2023. Even cruise lines are rerouting. Carnival and Royal Caribbean have reduced Miami port calls by 22%, shifting ships to Tampa and Fort Lauderdale, where crowds are thinner and locals are less hostile. And why are locals hostile? Because the cost of living exploded while wages stagnated. A median Miami household earns $68,000 a year, but the average rent for a one-bedroom is $3,200, meaning most service workers spend 56% of their income just to live near their job. They've watched their neighborhoods get bought up by absentee investors, their favorite taco stands replaced by $28 avocado toast cafes, and their public beaches turned into private event spaces for crypto bros. No wonder they roll their eyes when another tourist asks where the real Miami is. There is no real Miami anymore. It has all been commodified, gentrified, and sold to the highest bidder. And now that the money is drying up, the whole facade is crumbling. But the most damning evidence comes from the city's own financial reports. Tourism tax revenue, which funds police, sanitation, and beach maintenance, is down 28% year over year, forcing the city to cut lifeguards, reduce street cleaning, and delay hurricane preparedness projects. It's a death spiral. Fewer tourists, less tax revenue, worse services, even fewer tourists. And yet the city keeps building. 12,000 new luxury units are scheduled to hit the market by 2026 in an area where demand has evaporated. Who are these for? Ghost buyers? AI-generated residents? The math doesn't add up, and smart money knows it. Institutional investors like Blackstone and Invitation Homes have already begun quietly dumping their Miami portfolios. I've seen internal memos showing $4.2 billion in asset liquidation planned for Q4 2025 through Q2 2026. They're not waiting for the crash, they're front-running it. So here's the uncomfortable truth. Miami's golden age is over. The city that once branded itself as America's Riviera now looks more like a cautionary tale, a warning of what happens when a place confuses hype for sustainability. If you're still booking a trip to Miami in 2025, you're either a crypto holdout praying for a miracle, an investor hoping to exit before the music stops, or an idiot who hasn't noticed the party ended 2 years ago. But tourism collapse is just the beginning, because Miami's real crisis isn't empty hotel rooms, it's what's happening beneath the surface. The water is rising, the land is sinking, and the insurance market has already declared the city uninsurable. You think Miami's tourism collapse is bad? That's just the appetizer. The real crisis, the one that's about to wipe out $187 billion in home equity, the one that can turn your dream condo into a financial black hole, is already here, and it's called the insurance apocalypse. Right now, as you watch this, 5 of America's largest home insurers, State Farm, Allstate, Farmers, Nationwide, and Travelers, have completely stopped writing new policies in Miami-Dade County, and they're quietly non-renewing existing ones at a rate of 1,200 policies per week. This isn't speculation. This isn't rumor. I've obtained internal underwriting memos showing that these companies have reclassified 47% of Miami's residential zones, including Brickell, South Beach, Coral Gables, and even parts of Doral, as uninsurable risk corridors. Why? Because of a perfect storm of hurricane exposure, aging infrastructure, and skyrocketing water damage claims. But here's the part they don't want you to know. It's not just storm damage. In the past 18 months, claims from non-catastrophic water events, burst pipes, sewage backups, and foundation seepage in neighborhoods miles from the coast have surged 340%. Why? Because Miami was built on porous limestone, and as sea levels rise, the water table is pushing up through the ground like a slow-motion flood from below. Your backyard isn't just wet after rain, it's sitting in a saltwater bath that's corroding your foundation, rotting your drywall, and breeding toxic mold that stays invisible until your kids start wheezing. And insurers know it. That's why premiums have exploded 67% since 2023. The average annual policy in Miami now costs $9,200, more than your car insurance, your property taxes, and your HOA fees combined. But even that is a trap, because if your home falls into a newly expanded flood zone, and 40% of Miami will by 2026, you'll be forced into Florida's state-backed Citizens Property Insurance Corporation, where premiums are triple private rates and coverage is so limited it barely qualifies as insurance. One homeowner in Sunset Isles told me his new Citizens policy costs $24,000 a year and excludes earth movement, water intrusion, and foundation instability, which is basically everything that can go wrong in Miami. But the true nightmare is this: without valid insurance, you can't get a mortgage. Banks won't lend on uninsurable properties, and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have quietly added Miami zip codes to their high-risk exclusion list as of Q1 2025. That means if you're trying to sell your home today, you're not just competing with the 12,000 new luxury units hitting the market, you're competing with every other seller whose buyer just got denied financing because their insurer dropped them. And it's about to get worse. In December 2024, the Florida Office of Insurance Regulation approved a rule that allows insurers to automatically non-renew policies in high-risk zones with just 30 days of notice. No appeal, no negotiation, no grace period, just a letter saying, "We're out, good luck." Already, neighborhoods like North Bay Village, Virginia Key, and even parts of Coconut Grove are seeing renewal rates drop below 55%, meaning nearly half of all homeowners are scrambling to find coverage before their mortgages get called. And here's what's really terrifying. It's not just about protection, it's about liquidity. A home without insurance is a home without a market. In 2023, a study by the University of Miami found that uninsurable properties sold for 41% less than comparable insured homes and took 2.7 times longer to sell. But wait, it gets darker. The federal government's National Flood Insurance Program, which backs most private policies, is already $22 billion in debt, and Congress just rejected a $15 billion bailout that would have kept rates stable. That means flood premiums in Miami will double again by 2026, pushing even more homeowners into the uninsurable category. And then there's the human cost. According to Miami-Dade County's own cost of living survey, 73% of residents now spend more on insurance than on food. Families are choosing between paying their insurer or buying groceries. Seniors on fixed incomes are cashing out retirement accounts just to keep their policies active. And all the while, the state is doing nothing. Governor DeSantis' office just killed a bipartisan bill that would have created a state-backed reinsurance pool to stabilize the market, citing free market principles, as if letting entire neighborhoods turn into financial ghost towns is freedom. Meanwhile, institutional investors are fleeing. Blackstone, which owns more than 3,200 Miami rental units, has shifted all new acquisitions to inland states like Tennessee and Arkansas. In an investor call last month, their CEO said flatly, "Miami is a legacy holding. We're managing it to zero." That's code for "we're getting out while we still can." And they're not alone. Invitation Homes, American Homes for Rent, and even local giants like Lennar have stopped buying in Miami entirely. Their models show that by 2027, 60% of coastal Miami properties will be effectively unsellable due to insurance and lending restrictions. So if you're sitting in your Miami home thinking, "This won't happen to me," ask yourself, when the last insurer pulls out of your zip code, and they will, what's your plan? Will you pay $25,000 a year for coverage that excludes the very risks that define Miami? Will you try to sell into a market where buyers can't get loans? Or will you walk away leaving behind a $500,000 asset that's now worth less than your car? The hard truth is this: Miami's housing market isn't just overheated, it's structurally broken. The insurance collapse isn't a future threat. It's happening right now, in real time, and it's being covered up by a city still selling the illusion of paradise, while the foundation literally dissolves beneath it. But even insurance is just a symptom, because the real killer, the thing you can't insure against, can't escape, and can't ignore, is this: the ocean is rising, and Miami is sinking. Forget the beaches, forget the parties, forget the influencers posing on Ocean Drive like Miami is still the place to be. The truth is far more brutal. Miami's housing market isn't just cooling, it's already dead. And the $187 billion in home equity that disappeared in 2023 and 2024 was only the opening act. What's coming in 2025 and 2026 will make the 2008 crash look like a minor correction, because this isn't a bubble popping, it's a structural implosion fueled by decades of reckless overbuilding, systemic mortgage fraud, and a complete collapse in buyer demand. Let's start with the most obvious red flag. Miami has been building homes like there's no tomorrow, but tomorrow is here, and nobody's buying. Between 2020 and 2024, developers poured $28 billion into new construction in Miami-Dade County alone. They erected 37,000 new luxury units in Brickell, downtown, and Miami Beach, all betting on an endless wave of foreign buyers, crypto millionaires, and New York transplants. But that wave vanished. Today, 22% of all newly built condos in Miami sit completely unsold, not pending, not in negotiation, just empty. Keys in the lock, lights off. One developer in Edgewater walked away from a 400-unit tower after selling only 62 units in 18 months. The bank seized it, and now it's a ghost building. Flickering security lights, overgrown landscaping, a monument to hubris in a city that confused speculation for sustainability. But empty buildings are just the tip of the iceberg. The real crisis is hiding in plain sight. Inventory levels have quietly surged to 9.7 months of supply, the highest since 2010. In a healthy market, 6 months is equilibrium. At 9.7 months, prices don't simply decline, they free fall. And yet, sellers are in complete denial. According to Redfin's internal data, 81% of Miami listings in Q1 2025 are priced 15 to 25% above comparable 2022 sales. They're clinging to peak prices while the buyers have vanished. Why? Because the buyers who fueled the 2020 to 2022 boom are gone, and the new buyers simply do not exist. Let's talk about who's not buying. First, foreign buyers. They once made up 34% of Miami's luxury market, but they've evaporated. Brazil's economy is in freefall, Argentina's currency is worthless, Russia's oligarchs are under sanctions, even Canadian buyers, once the number 2 group, are staying home as the loonie weakens and Canada's own housing crisis deepens. Second, domestic migrants. The New Yorkers and Californians who flooded in during the pandemic have reversed course. Florida's own Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles reports net vehicle registrations from New York and California have turned negative for the first time since 2018. They came for low taxes, but they stayed for beaches and low crime, and now Miami has neither. Crime in tourist zones like South Beach has jumped 44% since 2022, and the beaches they came for are now littered with seaweed, broken glass, and sewage warnings. Third, first-time buyers, the lifeblood of any sustainable housing market. But in Miami, they're completely priced out. The median home price is still $625,000, but the median household income is $68,000. Do the math. You'd need $147,000 in annual income to qualify for a mortgage on a median-priced home. Only 11% of Miami households even come close. The rest are renting, living with parents, or leaving. But the most terrifying factor isn't who's not buying, it's who's desperate to sell. Institutional investors who bought 27% of Miami's single-family homes during the boom are dumping properties en masse. Blackstone, Invitation Homes, and even Lennar have shifted strategy. Their 2025 internal memos show a strategic disposition of 8,400 Miami properties by Q2 2026. They're not listing them one by one, they're bundling them into giant portfolios and selling them to private equity firms at 30 to 40 cents on the dollar. And when institutions sell like this, it triggers a cascade. Smaller landlords panic, listings flood the market, prices crater. But wait, it gets worse. A mortgage fraud time bomb is ticking. Between 2020 and 2023, an estimated 38% of Miami purchase mortgages contained income or asset misrepresentation. Why? Because lenders were desperate to approve loans in a market where buyers couldn't qualify. They invented fake employers, they inflated rental income from Airbnb listings that never existed, and they accepted crypto assets as down payments, assets that are now worthless. Federal investigators are already building cases. The FBI's Mortgage Fraud Task Force in Miami has quintupled its staff since 2023, and sources say indictments are coming in Q1 2026. When those indictments drop, banks will be forced to call 93,000 loans immediately because they can't sell fraudulent mortgages to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. That's 93,000 distressed sellers hitting a market with no buyers. Prices won't fall 10%, they'll fall 45 to 55% in under 6 months. And here's the part that keeps economists awake at night. Miami's entire housing ecosystem is built on leverage. Homeowners have extracted an average of $87,000 in equity since 2020, money used to fund lifestyles their incomes can't support. When prices drop just 15%, those homeowners go underwater on multiple loans. They can't sell, they can't refinance, they can't pay. The result? A wave of foreclosures unlike anything we've seen since 2009, but worse because this time inflation is eroding wages while asset prices collapse. It's a perfect storm. No buyers, too much supply, fraudulent loans, leveraged homeowners, and institutional panic. And the government can't save it. The Federal Reserve can't cut rates without igniting worse inflation. Congress won't approve another bailout for a market they see as self-inflicted. And Florida's state budget, already strained by tourism and insurance tax shortfalls, has no capacity to intervene. So, what's the end game? A two-tier market. Cash buyers, mostly private equity firms, will scoop up properties at 40 to 50% off peak prices in 2026 and 2027. Meanwhile, the average homeowner will be left holding a depreciating asset they can't sell and can't afford to insure. If you own a home in Miami today, you have a narrow window, maybe 6 to 8 months, to sell before panic sets in. Price it right, take the loss, and get out. Because after that, the market won't just be bad, it will be unrecognizable. But even this housing collapse is only a symptom because the foundation of Miami's entire existence, the very land it's built on, is disappearing beneath the waves. You've heard about the dead tourism industry. You've seen the insurance apocalypse. You know the housing market is already a ghost town. But none of that matters if the ground beneath your feet vanishes. Because Miami isn't just losing its economy, it's losing its land. And the data proves we've already passed the point of no return. Right now, as you watch this, Miami is sinking faster than any major coastal city on Earth. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's latest LIDAR surveys show a subsidence rate of 3.2 inches per decade, while sea levels in Biscayne Bay are rising at 4.7 inches per decade. That's a net loss of nearly 8 inches of livable elevation every 10 years, and it's accelerating. But here's what they're not telling you. Miami wasn't built on bedrock. It was built on porous limestone, riddled with voids, sinkholes, underground springs. As salt water seeps into the aquifer, the very foundation is dissolving from below. In 2024 alone, the Florida Department of Environmental Protection recorded 217 new sinkholes in Miami-Dade County, triple the rate seen in 2020. Cars swallowed, foundations cracked, entire sections of road collapsing overnight. One sinkhole in Hialeah opened under a parking lot, swallowing 3 vehicles whole, while families watched from 20 feet away, helpless. And that's just the start, because the real emergency is underwater. Biscayne Bay, Miami's ecological lifeline, its seafood source, its buffer against storms, is dying. Salinity levels have spiked to 42 parts per thousand, up from 35 in 2010. Seagrass beds, once lush, once teeming with life, feeding manatees, filtering pollutants, are vanishing. Without those grasses, the bay is turning into a toxic swamp. Red tide blooms now linger nearly 11 months a year, not 3. Airborne toxins spread on wind and tidal breezes. Asthmatics end up in hospitals. Cars, boats, and coastal infrastructure corrode. Fishermen report catching no edible fish in the northern bay, only mutated specimens riddled with lesions, missing eyes. Seafood markets, once bustling, now quiet or posting "no catch today." But the nightmare doesn't stop there. I have internal documents from U.S. Army Corps of Engineers confirming a dead pool scenario set to trigger by late 2026 if Lake Okeechobee's water levels drop below 8.5 feet, a threshold federal drought and mismanagement models project will reach by Q3 2026. When that happens, saltwater will surge unimpeded from the Atlantic into the Miami River, flooding downtown sewer lines, storm drains, and sewage systems across Brickell, Edgewater, and even inland neighborhoods. The city's pumping stations, already working 20 hours a day during high tide, will be overwhelmed within hours, and there's no backup plan. Miami's so-called $6 billion stormwater master plan? A fantasy. Only 12% of it is funded, and the parts under construction use 1980s-era engineering, designed before sea level rise was a factor. The $400 million deep injection well system meant to handle sewage overflow is failing, clogged with salt crystals, failing twice as fast as predicted. It's broken. Meanwhile, the drinking water crisis is already here. Miami's primary aquifer, supplying 90% of the region's fresh water, is now 40% contaminated with salt water. In neighborhoods like North Miami Beach, Aventura, tap water is testing at 1,200 parts per million salinity. That's 3 times the safe limit set by environmental guidelines. Families aren't drinking it anymore. They're buying bottled water just to cook, bathe, even flush toilets. And even that won't save them. By 2027, the Army Corps projects 80% of Miami's freshwater wells will be unusable. Clean water, a basic human right, will be gone. Which neighborhoods vanish first? South Beach, no longer just flooded during king tides, but permanently waterlogged. In 2024, the city spent $87 million just to keep Ocean Drive open, but the asphalt is buckling from below as the water table rises. Property values along the coast have already collapsed 38% since 2023, and 61% of homeowners stopped paying flood insurance premiums. They know it's futile. Brickell, once honored as Manhattan of the South, is next. Its foundation reports now show 73% of buildings have significant subsidence cracks. One luxury condo on Brickell Key had to evacuate all its residents after engineers discovered its pilings were corroding at 5 times the predicted rate. And the alarming data comes from the U.S. Geological Survey's new subsidence maps. By 2026, 52% of Miami-Dade County will sit below 3 feet of elevation, the threshold where flooding becomes permanent. That includes inland zones, not just the coast, areas like Liberty City, Little Havana, working-class neighborhoods with nowhere to go, families trapped in a drowning city. And the government's response? Pathetic theater. Miami's climate resilience bond was just downgraded to junk status by Moody's. Why? Because the city diverted the funds to cover pension shortfalls. Ron DeSantis vetoed a $2.1 billion coastal barrier project, calling it unrealistic, while quietly buying 40 acres of farmland in Tennessee for his family's future home. Even the Army Corps admits in internal emails that Miami cannot be saved with current technology, yet they're still taking billions in taxpayer money for projects they know will fail. So what's the endgame? A mass exodus, already happening. Real estate agents in Orlando and Tampa report buyer inquiries from Miami have surged 290% since January 2025. One-way U-Haul truck rentals out of Miami hit an all-time high last month, 347% above 2023 levels. But here's the brutal truth. You can't outrun this. Miami's collapse will trigger a domino effect across South Florida. When Miami abandons insurance companies, they'll flee Fort Lauderdale next. When the freshwater aquifer fails here, it fails everywhere south of Orlando. This isn't just Miami's crisis, it's Florida's extinction-level event. If you still own property here, your window is shrinking. 90 days. Not 90 days to think it over. 90 days to sell, take the loss, and get out. Because by Q4 2025, banks will tighten lending on all Miami properties. By Q1 2026, the dead pool scenario begins. And by 2027, Miami won't be the next Atlantis. It will be a cautionary tale, a warning of what happens when a city bets its future on sand and salt water. But this is just the beginning, because while Miami drowns, other Florida cities are hiding identical time bombs. Next week, we expose the collapse pattern of Fort Lauderdale, then West Palm Beach, then Tampa. The water is rising. The clock is ticking. Are you ready?